The roar began before dawn, a low rumble that seemed to emerge from the very stones of Rome itself. Marcus Aurelius Flavianus pressed his palm against the cool marble of his villa's balcony, feeling the vibration travel through the city's bones as 50,000 voices merged into a single hungry cry. Today was the opening of the new games. The emperor had promised spectacles that would eclipse even the legendary 100 Days of Titus. The gladiator schools had been emptying their barracks for weeks, sending their finest warriors to die, or achieve glory in the sand-covered arena that had become the beating heart of the empire. The institution of gladiatorial combat had not emerged overnight like some monstrous flower blooming in Roman soil. Its roots stretched back 3 centuries to the funeral rites of Etruscan nobles, where prisoners of war were forced to fight to the death beside the graves of their masters. Their spilled blood meant to honor the deceased and ease their passage to the underworld. What began as religious ceremony had evolved into something far more complex, an intricate web of politics, economics, and social control that would define Roman civilization for nearly 700 years. By the time Augustus claimed the purple, gladiatorial games had transcended their funerary origins to become the most powerful tool of imperial propaganda ever devised. The emperor understood what his predecessors had learned through trial and blood. Bread and circuses were not luxuries but necessities, as essential to maintaining power as legions on the frontier. A well-fed population entertained by spectacular violence would forgive almost any transgression, overlook any corruption, accept any hardship imposed by their rulers. The arena became a pressure valve for the empire's tensions, a place where social hierarchies could be both reinforced and temporarily suspended, where the powerless could cheer for their champions and imagine themselves victorious. The economics of death proved remarkably sophisticated. Each major gladiatorial school operated as a complex business enterprise, requiring enormous capital investment and generating returns that could make or break patrician fortunes. The Ludus Magnus, connected to the Colosseum by an underground tunnel, housed over 2,000 gladiators at its peak, each representing a significant financial investment. A prime gladiator could cost more than a luxury villa, his training requiring years of specialized instruction, medical care, and nutrition that surpassed what many free citizens received. The gladiators themselves came from every corner of the empire and beyond. Prisoners of war formed the traditional backbone of the schools, their foreign fighting techniques adding exotic flavor to the games. Germanic tribes contributed their massive warriors, men who fought with the fury of their northern forests. Celtic champions brought their distinctive weapons and tattooed flesh. From the deserts of Nubia came fighters whose endurance seemed supernatural under the Mediterranean sun. Pirates captured in the endless naval campaigns found themselves learning to die with dignity rather than drowning in anonymous defeat. Yet not all gladiators arrived in chains. The phenomenon of the octorati, free citizens who voluntarily entered gladiatorial service, revealed something profound about Roman society's relationship with honor, death, and spectacle. These men, often from the urban poor or veterans fallen on hard times, surrendered their freedom for a chance at glory and gold. They signed contracts that made them slaves for the duration of their service, accepting the ultimate paradox of Roman culture, that a man could achieve the highest honor by accepting the lowest status. The training itself was a masterpiece of applied violence, refined over generations into an art form that balanced entertainment value with survival skills. The gladiatorial schools employed retired fighters as instructors, men whose scarred bodies told the history of countless battles. They taught not just weapons technique, but the psychology of performance. The crucial understanding that a gladiator's primary enemy was not his opponent, but the crowd's boredom. A fighter who killed quickly and efficiently might find himself facing the thumbs down of a disappointed audience, while one who fought with style and drama could earn mercy even in defeat. Different classes of gladiators required entirely different training regimens. The Retiarius learned to move like a dancer, his net and trident demanding grace and timing rather than brute force. The heavily armored Secutor trained for endurance, learning to fight effectively while bearing weights that would cripple an ordinary man. The Threx practiced the art of the curved sword, a weapon that could slice around shields and find gaps in armor that straight blades could never reach. Each style had its own techniques, its own strategies, its own devoted following among the Roman populace. The medical care provided to gladiators surpassed anything available to the general population. Gladiatorial physicians, many of them Greek slaves with extensive anatomical knowledge, pioneered surgical techniques that would not be rediscovered for centuries. They understood the importance of keeping their charges alive and healthy, developing treatments for wounds, infections, and training injuries that represented the cutting edge of ancient medicine. Galen himself, the most famous physician of the Roman world, began his career treating gladiators in Pergamon, gaining an understanding of human anatomy through the wounds and injuries of the arena. The relationship between gladiators and the Roman populace was complex and contradictory. These fighters occupied the lowest social stratum, technically slaves without rights or legal standing, yet they could achieve fame that eclipsed senators and wealth that surpassed merchants. The most successful gladiators became celebrities whose names were shouted in the streets, whose likenesses appeared on pottery and jewelry, whose fighting styles were imitated by children in the alleys of Rome. Women of the highest social classes were rumored to seek affairs with famous gladiators, drawn to men who lived so completely outside the normal constraints of Roman society. The amphitheater itself was a marvel of engineering that reflected the empire's technological prowess and organizational capability. The Flavian amphitheater, known to history as the Colosseum, could hold more spectators than many modern sports stadiums. Its complex system of underground chambers, elevators, and pulleys allowed for elaborate staging effects that transformed the arena floor into forests, deserts, or naval battlefields. Wild animals could be raised from below through trapdoors, appearing suddenly to face bewildered criminals or trained bestiary. Water could flood the entire arena for mock naval battles featuring full-sized warships and hundreds of combatants. The social hierarchy of the seating arrangement reinforced Rome's rigid class structure while creating a shared experience that united the empire's diverse population. Senators and equities occupied the prime seats closest to the action, while the urban masses filled the higher tiers. Yet for the duration of the games, all social divisions temporarily dissolved in the face of shared spectacle. Emperor and slave might cheer the same gladiator, react with equal intensity to an unexpected turn in combat, participate in the same rhythmic chants that gave the crowd its collective voice. The psychology of the crowd represented perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the gladiatorial phenomenon. Modern scholars have identified the games as one of history's most successful examples of mass manipulation. A carefully orchestrated experience designed to channel popular emotions in politically useful directions. The scheduling of games often coincided with moments of social tension or political transition, providing distraction from economic hardship or military failure. The emperor's presence at the games created a direct connection between ruler and ruled, allowing the populace to see their leader share in their pleasures, while demonstrating his power to provide such magnificent entertainment. The economics of staging major games required resources that strained even imperial budgets. A single day's games could cost more than the annual tax revenue of entire provinces. Exotic animals had to be captured, transported, and maintained across thousands of miles. Professional gladiators commanded enormous fees for appearances. The free distribution of food and small gifts to spectators represented another significant expense. Yet these costs were considered essential investments in political stability, cheaper than maintaining additional legions to suppress potential unrest. The training and preparation of gladiators revealed the Romans' systematic approach to violence and entertainment. Young recruits underwent physical conditioning that built not just strength and endurance, but specific attributes valued by arena audiences. They learned to fall dramatically, to make non-fatal wounds appear mortal, to gauge crowd reaction and adjust their fighting style accordingly. The most successful gladiators were not necessarily the best pure fighters, but rather the most skilled performers. Men who understood that their survival depended as much on theatrical ability as martial prowess. The role of gladiatorial combat in Roman religion remained significant throughout the imperial period. The games retained their connection to funeral rites, with many spectacles staged to honor deceased emperors or commemorate military victories. The spilling of blood in the arena was seen as an offering to the gods, a sacrifice that maintained the divine favor essential to Rome's continued dominance. Gladiators often prayed before combat, invoking various deities for protection or a glorious death. The moment of death itself was ritualized, with prescribed phrases and gestures that transformed personal destruction into religious performance. The weapons and armor of gladiators represented a fusion of practicality and spectacle that reflected Roman attitudes toward both warfare and entertainment. Each gladiatorial class carried equipment designed not for maximum efficiency, but for visual impact and dramatic possibility. The Retiarius fought nearly naked, his vulnerability creating tension that armored fighters could not generate. The Hoplomachus carried the weapons and armor of Greek hoplites, evoking Rome's conquest of the Hellenic world. The Bestiary faced wild animals with minimal protection, their courage and skill highlighted by their dangerous situation. The phenomenon of gladiatorial schools extended throughout the empire, creating a network of training facilities that standardized techniques while allowing for regional variations. The great schools of Capua, where Spartacus had learned his deadly trade, competed with establishments in Gaul, Spain, and Egypt. Each school developed specialties based on local fighting traditions and available recruitment sources. Germanic schools emphasized strength and ferocity, while Eastern schools focused on agility and technique. This diversity ensured that Roman audiences never tired of the spectacle, as new fighting styles and exotic warriors constantly refreshed the arena's offerings. The daily routine of gladiators followed patterns that balanced training, rest, and preparation for death with mechanical precision. Dawn brought physical conditioning and weapons practice under the watchful eyes of trainers, who had themselves survived the arena. Midday offered respite and medical attention for training injuries. Afternoons might include tactical instruction, studying the techniques of potential opponents, or rehearsing the choreographed elements that made combat more entertaining for spectators. Evenings brought communal meals where fighters shared stories, formed alliances, and prepared mentally for battles that might come tomorrow or next month. The psychological preparation for combat required techniques that modern athletes and soldiers would recognize. Gladiators developed mental routines that allowed them to function effectively despite facing near-certain death. They formed intense bonds with their fellow fighters, relationships that provided emotional support while creating the tragic drama of friends forced to battle each other for crowd entertainment. Many gladiators adopted philosophical frameworks that gave meaning to their situation, often embracing Stoic principles that emphasized courage, honor, and acceptance of fate. The role of women in gladiatorial culture extended beyond the well-documented cases of female fighters. Women managed gladiatorial schools, sponsored games, and influenced the careers of individual gladiators through financial support or political connections. The wives and daughters of wealthy Romans often became passionate followers of particular fighters, creating fan cultures that resembled modern celebrity worship. Some women achieved significant power within the gladiatorial world, using their wealth and connections to shape the entertainment that captivated the empire. The medical knowledge gained through gladiatorial combat contributed significantly to Roman's understanding of human anatomy and wound treatment. Physicians attached to gladiatorial schools conducted what amounted to systematic studies of trauma, developing surgical techniques and medications that benefited the broader population. The detailed records kept of injuries and treatments created the ancient world's most comprehensive database of medical knowledge, information that would be transmitted to later civilizations through Greek and Arabic translations of Roman texts. The economic impact of gladiatorial games extended far beyond the direct costs of staging spectacles. Entire industries developed to support the arena culture, from armor and weapon manufacture to exotic animal trading. The games created employment for thousands of people, from gladiatorial trainers to arena maintenance workers. Regional economies often depended on their connection to the gladiatorial circuit, with cities competing to attract major games that would bring thousands of visitors and their spending power. The relationship between gladiatorial combat and Roman military culture remained complex throughout the imperial period. While some critics argued that watching others fight made citizens soft and cowardly, military leaders recognized that the games provided a form of combat training for the urban population. Veterans often found employment as gladiatorial trainers, passing on their battlefield experience to arena fighters. The tactical knowledge developed in gladiatorial schools sometimes influenced military innovation as commanders adapted arena techniques for battlefield use. The decline of gladiatorial games began not with Christian moral objections, but with changing economic and political realities. The empire's increasing financial strain made the massive expenditures required for major spectacles increasingly difficult to justify. Provincial rebellions and barbarian invasions demanded resources that had previously funded arena entertainment. The recruitment of gladiators became more challenging as the empire's military needs consumed available prisoners of war, and volunteer fighters found more lucrative opportunities in the army. The social changes that accompanied Rome's transformation from republic to empire to Christian state gradually undermined the cultural foundations that had made gladiatorial combat acceptable to the population. The rise of Christianity provided an alternative value system that emphasized mercy and human dignity over martial glory and entertainment through violence. Yet the games persisted for centuries after Constantine's conversion, demonstrating their deep roots in Roman culture and their continuing political utility for rulers facing popular unrest. The architectural legacy of gladiatorial combat extended throughout the Roman world, with amphitheaters constructed in every major city from Britain to Syria. These massive stone structures represented some of the most advanced engineering achievements of the ancient world. Their design problems and solutions contributing to architectural knowledge that influenced building techniques for centuries. Many amphitheaters remained in use long after gladiatorial combat ended, adapted for other purposes, but retaining their original grandeur as monuments to Roman engineering skill. The literary and artistic representations of gladiators in Roman culture reveal the complex emotions these fighters evoked in their audiences. Poets praised their courage while lamenting their fate, creating a literary tradition that celebrated martial virtue while questioning the social system that demanded such sacrifice for entertainment. Artists captured gladiators in mosaics, frescoes, and sculptures that emphasize both their physical beauty and their tragic situation, creating images that conveyed the paradox of their simultaneous elevation and degradation. The legal status of gladiators reflected broader Roman attitudes towards slavery, citizenship, and human value. While technically slaves without legal rights, gladiators could achieve a form of social mobility through success in the arena. The most successful fighters could earn enough prize money to purchase their freedom, though many chose to remain in gladiatorial service even after manumission. The legal frameworks governing gladiatorial combat evolved to address complex questions about responsibility, compensation, and the rights of fighters who had achieved celebrity status. The international character of gladiatorial combat reflected the empire's cosmopolitan nature while serving its political needs for unity and control. Fighters from every corner of the known world met in Roman arenas, their diverse fighting styles and cultural backgrounds creating spectacles that celebrated the empire's extent while demonstrating Roman dominance over foreign peoples. These international matchups served as symbolic reenactments of Rome's military conquests, allowing audiences to witness their empire's triumph over exotic enemies in controlled, entertaining circumstances. The training facilities attached to major amphitheaters represented some of the ancient world's most sophisticated athletic complexes. The Ludus Magnus in Rome included not only training areas and barracks, but also medical facilities, workshops for weapon and armor manufacture, and administrative offices that managed the complex logistics of gladiatorial scheduling. These facilities employed hundreds of people and required constant maintenance and upgrade to accommodate the evolving demands of arena entertainment. The relationship between gladiatorial schools and local communities was often tense, as residents simultaneously feared and were fascinated by the dangerous men housed in their midst. Gladiators were confined to their schools except during training and performance, their movement carefully controlled to prevent escape attempts or criminal activity. Yet their presence brought economic benefits and cultural excitement that made communities willing to accept the risks associated with housing professional fighters. The dietary requirements of gladiators reflected both practical nutritional needs and performance considerations that anticipated modern sports science. Gladiatorial physicians developed feeding regimens designed to build specific types of strength and endurance, while maintaining the physical appearance that crowds found appealing. Different gladiatorial classes required different nutritional approaches, with heavily armored fighters needing bulk and power, while lighter fighters emphasized agility and speed. The retirement and post-career opportunities available to successful gladiators created a unique social category within Roman society. Veterans who had survived their contracts often became trainers, passing on their hard-won expertise to new generations of fighters. Some established their own schools or became wealthy through wise investment of their prize money. A few achieved such fame that they could command substantial fees for appearances at private events or for endorsing products and services. The psychological impact of gladiatorial combat on Roman society extended far beyond the immediate entertainment value of the spectacles. The regular exposure to organized violence shaped cultural attitudes toward death, courage, and honor in ways that influenced everything from military recruitment to family relationships. Children grew up accepting that violent death could be entertainment, that human life had different values depending on social status, and that individual suffering could be justified by collective pleasure. The technological innovations developed for gladiatorial spectacles influenced broader Roman engineering and entertainment practices. The complex machinery required to stage elaborate arena shows contributed to advances in hydraulics, mechanics, and materials science. The organizational systems needed to coordinate massive spectacles involving thousands of participants helped develop administrative.net, techniques that were applied to military and civilian governance throughout the empire. The final transformation of Roman attitudes toward gladiatorial combat reflected broader changes in imperial culture and values. As the empire became increasingly Christian, the theological objections to using human death as entertainment gradually gained political influence. Yet the economic and political benefits of the games ensured their continuation in modified forms, with criminal executions and animal hunts placing traditional gladiatorial combat as the primary forms of arena entertainment. The legacy of gladiatorial combat in Western culture extends far beyond its historical significance, influencing literature, art, and popular entertainment for nearly 2 millennia after the last gladiator fought in a Roman arena. The image of the gladiator as tragic hero, the arena as a place where individual courage could transcend social circumstances, and the crowd as the ultimate judge of worth became enduring themes that continue to resonate in modern culture. The archaeological evidence recovered from gladiatorial sites throughout the former Roman Empire continues to provide new insights into the daily realities of arena culture. Excavations of gladiatorial cemeteries reveal information about fighter demographics, training injuries, and burial practices that illuminate aspects of gladiatorial life rarely mentioned in literary sources. The discovery of gladiatorial equipment, weapons, armor provides physical evidence that complements and sometimes contradicts written accounts of arena practices. The economic calculations that drove gladiatorial combat reveal the sophisticated financial planning required to maintain the institution across centuries of changing political and social conditions. The cost-benefit analyses that determined which spectacles to stage, which fighters to purchase or train, and which audiences to target demonstrate the Roman elite's systematic approach to using entertainment as a tool of social control and political advancement. As the sun set over the Tiber on that day of spectacles that had begun before dawn, Marcus Aurelius Flavianus could still hear the echoes of the crowd's roar fading into the evening quiet of Rome. The games had ended as they always did, with sand raked smooth over the stains of blood and sweat, with survivors limping back to their cells to await the next performance. With the dead carried away to unmarked graves that would soon be forgotten by all, except their fellow gladiators. Yet the institution itself would continue, feeding the empire's hunger for spectacle and serving its need for control, until the very foundations of Roman civilization crumbled beneath the weight of their own contradictions. In the arena, Rome had created the perfect mirror of its soul, magnificent and terrible, beautiful and horrifying, glorious and ultimately doomed to destroy itself through the very excesses that had made it great. The transformation of individual gladiators from anonymous slaves to celebrated heroes represented one of the most remarkable social phenomena in Roman history. Consider the case of Flama, whose gravestone in Sicily recorded 34 victories, 21 victories by surrender, and 9 draws before his final defeat. His career spanned over 2 decades, during which he refused freedom 4 times, choosing to remain in the arena rather than retire to civilian obscurity. His decision reflected a psychological truth about gladiatorial culture that Romans themselves struggled to understand. For many fighters, the arena became not just a place of employment, but a source of identity and purpose that civilian life could never match. The gladiatorial subculture developed its own language, customs, to social hierarchies that operated independently of broader Roman society. Veterans commanded respect that transcended their legal slave status, their scars serving as credentials that opened doors throughout the empire. New recruits learned not just fighting techniques, but the unwritten codes that governed arena behavior: when to show mercy, how to die with dignity, which gestures would curry favor with specific audiences. This knowledge was passed down through generations of fighters like a sacred tradition, creating continuities that lasted longer than many imperial dynasties. The religious dimensions of gladiatorial combat extended beyond the formal rituals that preceded major spectacles. Many gladiators developed personal relationships with specific deities, particularly Mars and Diana, gods associated with warfare and the hunt. Shrines within gladiatorial schools became focal points for private devotions, where fighters sought divine favor or guidance before facing uncertain death. Some gladiators claimed prophetic dreams that revealed their fate in upcoming battles, visions that were taken seriously by their companions, and sometimes influenced betting patterns among spectators. The betting that accompanied gladiatorial games represented a sophisticated gambling industry that generated enormous amounts of money and created its own criminal enterprises. Professional gamblers studied gladiatorial records with the intensity of modern sports analysts, tracking injury histories, psychological states, and matchup advantages that might influence combat outcomes. The odds on individual fights could shift dramatically based on rumors of illness, changes in training regimens, or even the personal relationships between fighters. Some gladiators were suspected of deliberately losing fights to benefit gambling conspiracies, though such arrangements carried the risk of execution if discovered. The role of gladiatorial physicians evolved far beyond simple wound treatment to encompass what modern medicine would recognize as sports psychology and performance enhancement. These doctors developed techniques for managing pre-combat anxiety, treating the psychological trauma of repeated violence, and maintaining the mental health of men who lived under constant threat of death. They understood that a gladiator's mind could be his most important weapon or his greatest weakness, and they pioneered therapeutic approaches that combined Greek medical theory with practical experience gained in the bloodiest laboratory imaginable. The infrastructure required to support gladiatorial spectacles throughout the empire represented one of the largest entertainment industries in human history. Beyond the famous amphitheaters, the system included gladiatorial schools, training facilities, medical centers, equipment workshops, animal collection networks, and transportation systems that moved fighters, animals, and equipment across thousands of miles. The coordination required to stage simultaneous games in multiple cities demonstrated organizational capabilities that rivaled modern multinational corporations. The cultural exchange facilitated by gladiatorial combat created unexpected connections between distant regions of the empire. Fighting techniques developed in British gladiatorial schools influenced training methods in Egypt. Germanic weapons designs were modified by Spanish armorers for use in African arenas. Celtic battle tactics were studied and adapted by trainers throughout the Mediterranean. This cross-cultural fertilization occurred largely outside formal diplomatic or military channels, representing a unique form of international communication through the medium of organized violence. The impact of gladiatorial combat on Roman family life was profound and often overlooked by contemporary sources. Children from wealthy families grew up attending games as part of their social education, learning to appreciate the finer points of combat technique and crowd psychology. Its early exposure to violence as entertainment shaped their adult attitudes toward everything from military service to domestic discipline. Wives and daughters of the elite often developed passionate interests in particular gladiators, creating social tensions that reflected the uncomfortable intersection of sexuality, violence, and social status. The seasonal rhythms of gladiatorial combat followed patterns that connected the arena to agricultural cycles, religious festivals, and political calendars throughout the empire. Spring brought new recruitment drives as training schools sought fresh talent for the coming season. Summer spectacles coincided with harvest festivals and military campaigns, providing entertainment for urban populations while celebrating agricultural abundance and martial success. Autumn games often commemorated specific historical events or honored deceased dignitaries. Winter brought a relative quiet that allowed for equipment maintenance, advanced training, and recovery from the intense pace of the active season. The technical innovation driven by gladiatorial needs contributed to advances in metallurgy, engineering, and materials science that benefited the entire empire. The demand for high-quality weapons led to improvements in steel production and blade design. The need for effective but visually impressive armor encouraged experiments with new alloys and manufacturing techniques. The complex mechanical systems required for arena spectacles pushed Roman engineering capabilities in directions that had applications far beyond entertainment. The philosophical implications of gladiatorial combat engaged some of the greatest minds of the Roman world. Seneca's famous letter describing his experience at the games revealed the moral contradictions that even Stoic philosophers struggled to resolve. The spectacle of men dying for entertainment challenged fundamental assumptions about human dignity and the proper use of courage. Yet even critics acknowledged that gladiatorial combat produced examples of virtue and heroism that could inspire moral reflection and personal growth. The economic ripple effects of major gladiatorial spectacles extended throughout the imperial economy. Cities hosting important games experienced temporary population booms as spectators traveled from surrounding regions, creating demand for lodging, food, transportation, and various services. Local craftsmen produced gladiatorial memorabilia, from miniature weapons to portrait medallions of famous fighters. Farmers and merchants adjusted their production and inventory to take advantage of the increased demand that accompanied major spectacles. The international recruitment networks that supplied gladiatorial schools with fighters created what amounted to a global talent market that operated according to supply and demand principles. Regions experiencing military conflicts produced prisoners of war who could be purchased cheaply and trained for arena combat. Areas with martial traditions commanded premium prices for their warriors. The most successful gladiatorial schools developed relationships with specific suppliers, who could deliver fighters with particular skills or characteristics desired by their audiences. The legal frameworks governing gladiatorial combat evolved to address increasingly complex questions about liability, compensation, and the rights of various parties involved in arena spectacles. Laws specified the responsibilities of gladiatorial school owners for the actions of their fighters, the obligations of game sponsors for spectators' safety, and the procedures for handling disputes over combat outcomes. These regulations created precedents that influenced Roman legal thinking about entertainment, public safety, and commercial relationships. The preservation of gladiatorial records and statistics reflected the Roman passion for documentation and their understanding of the entertainment value of historical continuity. Gladiatorial schools maintained detailed records of their fighters' performances, medical histories, and training progress. These documents were consulted by trainers, physicians, and betting specialists, who used the information to make informed decisions about matchups, medical treatment, and commercial investments. The role of gladiatorial combat in Roman military recruitment became increasingly important as the empire expanded and required larger armies. Veterans of arena combat possessed proven courage under extreme stress and familiarity with various weapons and fighting techniques that made them valuable military assets. Some gladiators earned their freedom through military service, using their arena experience as a stepping stone to careers in the legions or auxiliary forces. The architectural evolution of amphitheaters reflected changing tastes, technologies, and social needs over the centuries of gladiatorial history. Early arenas were simple wooden structures designed primarily for functionality. Later stone amphitheaters incorporated sophisticated engineering features that enhanced spectator comfort, improved acoustics, and allowed for more elaborate staging effects. The final generation of amphitheaters represented the pinnacle of Roman architectural achievement, combining practical requirements with aesthetic grandeur that proclaimed imperial power and cultural sophistication. The decline of gladiatorial combat was neither sudden nor uniform throughout the empire. In some regions, traditional games continued for decades after they had ended in Rome itself. Local variations emerged as different areas adapted arena entertainment to their own cultural preferences and economic circumstances. Some former gladiatorial schools were converted to military training facilities, their expertise in combat instruction serving new purposes in a changing world. The transformation of former gladiators into Christians represented one of the most dramatic social changes of the late imperial period. Men who had lived by violence found new meaning in a religion that preached mercy and redemption. Some former fighters became prominent Christian leaders, their experience with suffering and death providing unique perspectives on martyrdom and spiritual struggle. Their stories became powerful testimony to the transformative power of faith and the possibility of redemption even for those who had lived outside conventional moral boundaries. The archaeological investigation of gladiatorial sites continues to reveal new information about the daily realities of arena culture. Recent excavations have uncovered gladiatorial equipment, personal belongings, and even graffiti that provide intimate glimpses into the lives of individual fighters. These discoveries complement literary sources and help reconstruct a more complete picture of how gladiatorial combat actually functioned as both entertainment and social institution. The influence of gladiatorial combat on later European culture extended far beyond its obvious impact on medieval tournaments and martial traditions. The arena model of competitive entertainment provided a template that influenced everything from Renaissance court spectacles to modern sports. The psychological dynamics of crowd behavior in Roman amphitheaters offered insights that were studied and applied by later rulers seeking to manipulate popular opinion through carefully orchestrated public events. The final legacy of gladiatorial combat lies not in its violence, but in its demonstration of human capacity for courage, skill, and dignity under the most extreme circumstances. The arena produced countless examples of heroism that transcended the brutal context in which they occurred. These stories of bravery in the face of death, of friendship maintained despite competition, of honor preserved in degrading circumstances, became part of the cultural inheritance that Rome left to subsequent civilizations. In the end, the gladiators achieved a form of immortality that even emperors might envy, their names and deeds preserved in the collective memory of humanity long after the empire that created them had crumbled into dust.